What is the hardest part in making games? Some would say it's coding or art, but what if I told you that the hardest part of making a game isn't coding or 3D modeling or even all the bugs that pop up at the worst possible time? What if the hardest part is making something fun? Yeah, turns out that's a whole different challenge. Hi, this is Nova, back with another devlog for my game, and I know what you're all thinking.
Nova, it's been ages since your last devlog. Did you quit?
First of all, rude. Second of all, no. I've actually been working very hard behind the scenes, making new content for the game and learning a ton of stuff along the way. Also, I'm a bit sick as you can probably tell by my voice, so bear with me if it sounds a little off. So, let's rewind a bit. You know when I first decided to make this game 3D? Well, I didn't exactly have an idea about what I was getting myself into. I mean, who would have thought that in order to make a 3D game, you actually have to learn 3D? Shocking, right? Yeah, thanks old me. I had to learn that the hard way. You see, I'm comfortable with coding. I can handle Unity with all its bugs all day long. But 3D modeling, that was a whole different beast. It felt like I was thrown into a universe where I didn't even speak the language. And this is when I made my first enemy in gamedev, Blender. Every time I tried to make something, I felt completely out of my depth. I was trying to model basic stuff, but it felt like I was failing left and right. I was determined, but also really frustrated. But being the stubborn guy I am, I kept chipping away at it every single day. A little progress here, a little improvement there. It wasn't fast, but I was learning. Slowly, Blender stopped feeling like an enemy and started feeling like, well, a weird complicated friend who occasionally wanted to destroy my progress. But hey, that's gross, right? Then, one day I was hanging out on my Discord server, and that's when I saw some people joking about the beautiful trees I made in Unity. Now, it wasn't mean or anything, in fact, it was all in good fun, but for me, that was just the spark I needed. I thought, alright, why not try making trees? And this is when I decided I am making a tree, and I'm going to do it in Blender this time.
Next time I have an idea like that, punch me in the face.
So, I jumped straight into the monster that's called Blender. Hours of trial and error, lots of why is this happening, and many failed attempts later, I finally managed to create something that actually resembled a tree. Now I know it isn't perfect and some parts are still a bit rough, especially the leaves, but after all that struggle, I was honestly proud of it. It felt like a huge win just to make something that roughly belonged in my game. And right after finishing my first tree, I was excited to jump into making a second one. And that's when Blender really started to click for me. I wasn't struggling anymore. I was starting to get the hang of it. The tools began to feel more intuitive, and the process started to flow. I found myself getting lost in it, enjoying the creation process rather than just wrestling with the software. Blender almost felt like a friend at that point. Something I could rely on to bring my ideas to life. It was perfect. I was genuinely having fun. Until of course it crashed and I lost all my progress. I guess one tree will do for now. Anyway, big thanks to the Discord server for that unintentional motivation. It really pushed me to take that step and try something new. Okay, enough about trees for now, and let's talk about something interesting. After spending what felt like a lifetime learning Blender and feeling like I had finally accomplished something, it was time to get back to actually making my game. And I'm sure most of you know the feeling. You're pumped, ready to dive in, and you've got a million ideas floating in your head. But then you realize you need to focus. You need to figure out what actually moves the game forward. And that's when I pulled out my trusty lists. Yeah, I have lists. A lot of lists. First, there's my things I will add because they are super cool but I'll probably never finish list. It's a bit of a trap, honestly. It's filled with things that sound amazing but are kind of a distraction. Stuff like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to have a dynamic weather system where the game reacts to the moon phases? Yeah, that's definitely something for later. In the post-launch updates, right? Then there's the other list. The one I like to call the boring core mechanics that I have to add because they are in every game. This list is less exciting but way more practical. It's full of things like you need a transportation system. And what about resource management? Stuff that might not get the same impressive factor but are crucial for the game to actually function. So I took a step back, looked at my lists and realized it was time to tackle something from that boring list. And honestly, the building system was calling my name. You see, I had been collecting resources in the game for a while, but they weren't really doing anything. It felt like I was just hoarding stuff for no reason.
What is my purpose?
You pass butter.
Oh my god.
Yeah, welcome to the club, pal.
So I decided it was time to finally take those resources I've been collecting and build something with them. And I'm not just making any building system, I'm making a building system that actually works and fits in the game. I'll spare you the details of the search, but I spent hours online trying every tutorial I could find on building systems. Problem was, none of them were quite right for what I needed. So, as always, I turned to my best friend, ChatGPT. I want to make a building system. Can you help me?
How about I shove that building system up your...
Yeah, I love you too, buddy. Struggling to find a solution, I decided to just make my own custom building system. Here's how my system works. The player starts by selecting a building from a menu. And once they have picked up a building, the system shows a green preview of where that building will go. This preview moves with your cursor, snapping to the grid so everything stays nice and aligned. But if the space is already occupied, like by a rock or another building, the preview turns red to let you know, nope, you can't build here. It's simple, but getting it to work was anything but that. The magic behind it? It's a raycast. Basically, it's like the game shoots out an invisible line from the camera into the world saying,
What are you doing?
Huh? Me? Just hanging around.
hey, what am I pointing at right now? That information then fades into a function that calculates where the building should snap onto the grid. It's all about precision, getting everything to line up perfectly without being frustrating for the player. But wait, there's more. You might be wondering, Nova, how did you make that cool green preview effect? Did you just slap a green texture on it? Well, not exactly. I actually ended up learning about one more thing. It's called shaders. Shaders is like little programs that run on the graphics card and decide how things look on a screen. At first, I thought shaders were this terrifying, mystical thing that only wizards could master, but Unity has this node-based system that makes it so much easier to create simple effects like this one. And I will admit, it was still a bit of a challenge, but seeing that preview turns from green to red in real time was so worth it. After getting the base...
Oh, he needs some milk!
After getting the basic building system up and running, I should have felt accomplished, right? But I didn't. It actually felt boring. Now don't get me wrong, it worked perfectly fine, but something about it just didn't feel right. It lacked that fun factor that makes you want to spend hours just building for the sake of it. Something wasn't clicking, and I couldn't figure out why. It was the kind of thing you use because you have to, not because you want to. But then, one day it hit me. I realized exactly what was missing, and let me tell you, when I implemented it, the entire system went from meh to I can't stop playing with this. Here's what happened. After trying everything to fix it, small tweaks here, fancy effects there, it still lacked that spark. And after a few days of banging my head against the wall, I gave up. I thought, maybe it's good enough for now. Maybe I'll just move on and figure it out later. And that's exactly what I did. I pushed the building system aside and started working on some other parts of the game. Then, one day, I sat down to unwind and decided to fire up Satisfactory. You know, just to relax. Totally not an excuse to ignore my to-do lists. As I started building platforms and setting up conveyor belts, something about the process felt different. The building in that game, it felt good. I paused and stared at the screen. My brain started going into overdrive. What makes this so satisfying? I kept playing, but now I wasn't playing to relax or enjoy the game. I was analyzing it. I focused on every detail of the building system, how it responds to your input, how smooth and flowed everything feels, and then it hit me. In that moment, it was like a switch flipped in my brain. I knew exactly what my system was missing. My heart was racing. I couldn't wait to get back to Unity and try it out. What was that thing I found, you ask? Well, it was multi-build mode. Think about it. What makes building in a game like Satisfactory so satisfying? It's the ability to build multiple things at once. You don't have to painstakingly place each item one at a time like some kind of medieval peasant. Instead, you click, move, click again, and bam! You've got an entire row of buildings in seconds. That was the missing piece of my system. As soon as the idea hit me, I dropped everything, opened Unity, and started experimenting. At first, it was messy. And I mean really messy. I had to figure out how to calculate the positions for multiple buildings, how to handle obstacles in the path, and how to make it all feel smooth and responsive. I spent hours fiddling with my code, testing one approach, scraping it, trying another. There were moments where I thought, maybe this isn't worth it. Maybe I should just stick to the boring old single building system. But every time I thought about how much fun multi-build could be, I kept going. And finally, after days of trial and error, it worked. Initially, I set it up so you would drag your mouse to define the start and end point, and as soon as you release the mouse, it would fill everything in between, either horizontally or vertically. It sounded great in theory, but in practice, oh boy, my amazing mouse decided to misclick every other try. Buildings ended up in all wrong places, and I was losing my mind. Speaking of my mouse, listen, it's been a good companion. Loyal, reliable, well, mostly at least. But at this point, it's held together by sheer willpower and a couple of questionable tape jobs. So, if you want to help me retire this ancient relic and upgrade to a mouse that doesn't have a grudge against me, you can support me on Patreon, link in the description. Anyway, after a couple of rage-fueled test sessions, I immediately switched to a more precise approach. Click once to set the starting building, and then click again to place the end point. The game calculates all the positions in between and fills them in instantly. No more misclick disasters. It was smooth, reliable, and honestly, just so much better. And let me tell you, as soon as that version was working, I couldn't stop playing with it. I'm not even exaggerating. I spent hours running around, laying down rows and grids of buildings in every direction, just watching the system do its magic. I tried placing lines of walls, rows of platforms, and entire grids of foundations. Whether it was horizontal, vertical, or some weird mix of both, it all just worked. It was addictive. I would sit down for what I told myself was a quick test, and then, before I even know it, I would spend an hour creating the most elaborate building layouts I could imagine. And that's when I realized I had hit the sweet spot. The building system was no longer just functional. It was genuinely fun. For the first time, I felt like I had built something that could hold up to systems I admired in my favorite games. But there was still something missing. Something small, yet essential to make the system feel complete. And that's when I decided to add the ability to rotate buildings. Adding rotation itself was pretty straightforward. Each time you press a button, the building rotates by 90 degrees. Simple, clean, effective. But here's the thing, I didn't bother implementing a way to rotate by less than 90 degrees. I mean, who needs that, right? Well, apparently I accidentally did. If you click while the building is mid-rotation, it locks in place at whatever angle it happens to be at. Want a building tilted at 47.3 degrees? Congratulations, you have found the ultimate secret feature. Totally intentional, by the way.
Stop the cap!
With rotation added, the building system felt polished and completed. Or at least as polished as a system made by someone clicking halfway through rotations can be. Building this system made me realize just how much effort goes into the mechanics we take for granted in games. Something as simple as snapping a building to a grid can take weeks to get right. So, shout out to all the devs out there making amazing games. You guys are the real MVPs. And to everyone watching this, let me know what you think of the building system so far. Is it fun? Does it need more features? Let me know down in the comments. Now that the building system is fully functional, I hope by the next devlog I would have made some machines. With that said, this is where I'll end it for now. If you've made it this far, thanks for watching and being part of this journey. It really means a lot. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out my Discord server if you have any questions, feedback, or just want to join the tree roasting. And if you want to support the channel and my work, check out my Patreon. I post early access content there all the time. Catch you in the next one.